All right, folks. 32 CFR rule is out. The Cyber AV Town Hall has taken place. Joy Beeland is in the house joining us, and we're going to talk about the Town Hall. Joy, how is it?
Oh, happy Halloween, my friend.
You look like you're having a howdy good time over there.
Yeah, I am having a howdy good time. I grew up in Central Oregon, and this is a revisit of my 9-year-old self when I used to show horses. I look a little more put together than I did at 9 years old, though, I hope.
What, so you used to show horses, like parade them around the arena and stuff
I
like that?
did.
What was
Yeah,
the name
state
of your
fair, the
favorite
whole
horse?
thing. Huh?
What was the name of your favorite horse?
El Kabar.
Kabar.
I didn't
Okay.
name him. He came to me that way.
Okay. I just, just from knowing you personally and not beating up my microphone, but from knowing you personally, I just envisioned like a really funny name or a witty name that goes to it that kind of makes you scratch your head and think. So,
well, thanks for that, but no such luck.
Since the last time that we were together, Joy,
Yeah.
a lot has happened. Congratulations, have been promoted here at Summit 7, or excuse me, you have assumed a new, very, very important role for us at Summit 7 that we're grateful, and kind of stretching your legs a little bit, participating in some assessments. I don't know if you heard or not while you were busy doing all that, but a role drop that kind of fuels the entire CMMC program. And then, the rule drops in the AV Town Hall within 2 weeks. Obviously, it's convenient that they have their town hall to have the first town hall after the rule drops. And we're not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this show talking about the rule because this show is intended to talk about the town hall. If you want to hear about the rule, Joy, I think, as you know, Summit 7 is going to be hosting a webinar. Scott Edwards and Jacob Horn, it's me, are going to be on November the 7th at 10:30 in the morning. To talk about everything 32 CFR. I have been buried away in a cave going over the rule. Scott's been doing the same, and we're going to come out and give a concentrated, well-evaluated take of the rule so people can better understand it. And then between now and then after that webinar takes place, if you have any questions every Friday, as you know, Joy, I don't know if you watched it or not, the CUI Hotline, gaining in popularity. It's doing a good job, especially now, gaining a lot of traction and answering a lot of questions for people. And it seems like the crowd is now being more diverse and not a lot of the usual suspects. More people are coming in for the first time just hearing about CMMC.
Yeah, every Friday at noon Central Time, I have it on my calendar. I make sure my food's ready to go before that and eat my lunch with the two of them. It's a fun time.
I always, it's tough to eat because I'm laughing so hard sometimes. So they did crack me up. It's a good duo.
Yeah.
So for this show, I wanted to kind of start off, and there was some stuff that was distributed on this month's town hall, and a high anticipation first town hall after the rule, and we think that they're going to come out guns a-blazing, but it was essentially a distribution of information of what to expect, things that are changing with regards to certifications and training, as basically offset from the rule, right? Things changed within the 32 CFR. I think that, in covering the town hall for this week's show, Joy, I think that a lot of people attended this town hall with thoughts that a lot of questions that they had that they wanted answered for the longest time could finally be answered because the final rule came out. But what we got was a distribution of information from the Cyber AB with regards to what they still need to do or the things that still need to be done before the effective end date that's listed on the 32 CFR CMMC final rule, right? And so I don't want to dig too deep into the list. I'm going to read off the list really quickly, but there is one in particular that I really, really want us to talk about, Joy, because I think it opens up an area for concern or an area for potential bottlenecking when it comes to the initial market launch of CMMC, not the program, or not the contractual launch that we're expected with 48 CFR, but the movement that we expect to see before 48 CFR comes out.
You got it. Okay.
Matt Travis, the CEO of the Cyber AB, came out and he told us that before December 16th, the following things are intended to happen. First and foremost, the reauthorization of 58 existing C3PAOs that are in the ecosystem right now. We're going to come back to that one because this is going to cause some problems. In addition to that, the CMMC EMAS system, right? So the EMAS system for CMMC is an area where the assessment results are going to be uploaded and kept for records, for legal purposes, for whatever purposes for referencing that the assessment happened, and that there is a record of it in case anybody has to reference back to it at any point in time in history. And so this is a system that needs to be stood up, and the users that have to access it that need to be trained on it. This needs to happen before December 16th. In addition to that happening, as we talked about on last month's show, the CMMC assessment process, or the CAP document, needs to be updated, is going to be updated. There's going to be an update to the Code of Professional Conduct, which basically determines how anybody that's a CMMC certified professional or assessor or any certified role has to act. The design of the CMMC Level 2 certificate, as an OSA or OSC achieves their Level 2 certificate and they receive the passing score from the C3PAO, they're going to get a nice fancy little certificate. Well, we got to design, the AB has to design that certificate, let it know what it looks like, and get that approved. And then another important one that we can touch on briefly at the end of this, but I think is going to be very key in the process, is the AB has to establish an appeals board for assessments in case there are any assessments which need, remediation, and have that appeals process and that board approved by the DoD. So that has to go through an approval process. So we're talking about, in a little over, I don't know, Joy, a month and a half, the reauthorization of 58 C3PAOs, setting up EMAS, which anybody who has ever used EMAS can say, okay, good luck. Redeveloping or redrafting of the CMMC assessment process, the COPC, designing a certificate to give to successful OSAs, and developing and establishing and getting approved at appeals board. That's a lot to do in a little bit over a month, don't you think?
It's a lot to do. And, we do have two entities kind of assisting with this over at the Cyber AB, because CAICO has their own things that we're going to be walking through. But just the Cyber AB in general, to be able to reauthorize these C3PAOs and generate these documents, the CAP document, that is the authoritative document that all assessors will be following under the C3PAO to understand and assess the same way from one environment to the next, to make sure that there's some consistency and that we have a standard that we're following. And that document, there's been a lot of scrutiny on it in the past in its draft format. The only people who have gained exposure to that are the C3PAOs and then the CCPs and CCAs that have undergone the 5-day training for those boot camps, and they receive a copy of that draft, but it hasn't been put out there for scrutiny by the OSCs themselves to understand what to expect in the assessment process. So there's a lot of things to consider in the redevelopment of the CAP, the updated the Code of Professional Conduct, because there's a lot of questions around what is a conflict of interest, and I'm glad to see that that's being addressed. Yeah, all of these things, quite a bit for a Cyber AB to take on in what is really going to be about 6 weeks left now for them to meet that deadline.
Yeah, and so the list is already as long as it is, and so, like, me, I'm the cynic, and so, like, I like to dig into things, and like I need to analyze things. I've made a solid career analyzing risk and helping people understand how to remediate that risk, and that's just one of those things. It's how my brain works. And so as I'm listening to Mr. Travis discuss the things that need to take place, the thing that stuck out to me, I kind of put two and two together when they started talking about what necessarily needs to happen for reauthorization of a C3PAO under the new standards. One of the things that was listed, and it's a little confusing, and listeners in the audience, if I get this wrong, I'm not meant to be right 100% of the time, but this is my impression, this is my analysis, and this is what I think. And Joy, I want to put it on you and see what you think. Tell me if I'm crazy or not. So reauthorization of 58 C3PAOs. Sounds easy enough. You just have to go through and make sure that they're still meeting. Did you pass the assessment? Yes. Are you meeting the ISO certification requirements, right? Because that's a requirement of C3PAOs. And then this one that comes out of, I don't think it came out of nowhere, because it was mentioned previously way back in years of lore, but each C3PAO to get authorized must have 3 CCAs on staff.
Mm-hmm.
So this gets tricky. And I just heard that and I was like, what? So tell me if I'm wrong. Is that what you heard, correct too? Or is that
I heard that also? And so here's the big question is, they did say that the CCAs could be W-2 or 1099.
Mhm.
And how many 1099s would any given C3PAO employ as opposed to a W-2? Is there a
Mhm.
requirement for a minimum of at least one W-2 out of the three? I think so, because I think that the QA or the EMAS entity needs to be dedicated to a given C3PAO. But if they're a 1099, can they serve on multiple C3PAOs?
Yeah,
That's
and
one
then
of the
the other
questions.
question is if you know, obviously, you, Joy, can't be Summit 7, we're not a C3PO, obviously, and you are ACCA, and you have served on JSVAs, and we're gonna kinda get into that later too. But you can't be a lead assessor on a JSVA or be listed as the lead assessor for 19 of these organizations to get authorized, right? So there's gonna have to be enough qualified lead assessors for each individual organization, easily enough. I'm pretty sure there are plenty of qualified people. 322 assessors in the assessor pool right now in the marketplace as of 20 minutes before we shot this show. I double checked. Okay. So I want you to keep in mind as I'm saying this, there's 322 of those, but changes to that come from the rule and changes to the requirements that make you eligible to be a CCA that is eligible to participate on an assessment, right? There have been those changes, and if you don't meet the requirements that in the changes, then you can be suspended. Your privileges, you can't participate in an assessment. Those things can be suspended. The reason why this comes up is, Joy, if you're suspended as a CCA, can you be listed on a C3PAO for them to get authorized, right? Because you have to have valid CCAs, right? So if
Yeah.
I have a whole roster, and I think that that's where the parity comes in. How many not only are going to be suspended, but I want to know how many of them are actually, and we've talked about this plenty in person and on this show last month. How many of these people that have these roles intend to be assessors, intend to do assessing, or are just trying to help their own internal organization with their own internal knowledge? That's the
Yeah,
other.
that'll be interesting. I think that in the mix of students in the CCP classes versus the CCA classes, what I see is that a lot more folks in CCA do intend to be an assessor versus the mix kind of goes upside down the other direction in the CCP class, where
Mhm.
you have a small, quarter of the students generally are intending to go on to be an assessor. And the numbers prove that out in the marketplace, because I think that for CCPs, there's over 1,000. For CCAs, there's the 322 that you discovered. So a lot of folks go into that CCP wanting to help their own consulting practice or as an external service provider or their own internal IT team to understand what an assessor would be looking for. And that makes perfect sense at the CCP level. At the CCA level, by and large, those students in there do want to be assessors.
Yeah. Is it going to be their day to day? How many of them are going to be full time assessors? And then that brings back to the question that you presented. How many W-2s are allowed? I know that one lead assessor has to be assigned and one quality assurance assessor has to be assigned. That's what was mentioned in the town hall. But that's just something to keep cognitive of. I'm not saying that the sky is falling. I'm not saying that this is an emergency. But what I am saying is right now, with everything fine and dandy in that we have 58 authorized C3PAOs and 322 assessors, every time I speak to a C3PAO, the sense I feel, or the sense that I get, is the calendar doesn't have very many openings.
Oh my gosh, no. Yeah, it's crazy.
So imagine if there's less calendars for OSAs to deal with at that point in time as the market push comes, because everybody's still sitting back and thinking, well, that's fine. They can get authorized within a year. But we're already starting to see where organizations are being told, you need to have a plan for this. And the plan has to end with your organization being CMMC level 2 certified. And that timeline that's being given from the prime contractors to those subcontractors is before even the 48 CFR rule could be published and finalized.
Yeah, I mean, the calendars that you're speaking of, you and I know C3PAOs that have told us 2 weeks ago before the JSVA stress test week that we all just experienced that they were booked out through May or June of 2025 for their C3PAO CMMC level 2 assessments. After JSVAs are done, that's the starting lineup already for several of the C3PAOs. So the smart OSCs that know, or OSAs that know that they want to get this in before it starts coming into their contracts, before it's a requirement of 48 CFR, they should start calling those C3PAOs now and seeing what the availability is to get on that calendar.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Joy. And one of the other elements that might disqualify a CCA or a CCP from participating on an assessment team was covered during the Keiko Corner portion of the Cyber AB Town Hall last night. And that basically is that there is a release. There is a Delta training that's coming out that's going to cover basically all of the differences from the CMMC program that everybody was trained on that has a certified role right now, and the CMMC program that exists now with the final rule being out. And the caveat to that is that it is an open book, non-time test. You have to get a 75% in order to pass. You get 2 attempts to take it. So if you can't pass the test in open book 2 attempts, I don't know if you need to be a certified professional, but that's just my personal opinion. And then, so once you pass it, you get a certificate. That certificate is needed for you to be author or allowed to participate on an assessment. Anybody that does not complete this training. So then yet another thing that if people aren't paying attention and being proactive can kind of contribute to a constriction of the assessor pool, the assessment teams available to deal with what this is it's the market push is what it is. It's the market push that's coming, supply chain readiness. So last night, Joy,
Delta training, I have to say, I am going to hand it to them because they're doing it the right way. There's not enough earth-shattering changes from the training that CCPs and CCAs have already received that would require going back to a approved training provider, sitting in a class, taking a proctored exam, going through all of that. So I believe that if they say we're estimating between the training and the exam, it's going to take 2 hours of your time, and we're being given until mid-December when all of this happens for us to be in the marketplace, validated, ready to go, especially the CCAs and lead CCAs that need to be available for assessments. It's the right way to do it. Make it easy peasy. And honestly, this is reminiscent to me of the RP training, where open book means that you have the answers right there, right?
Yeah.
How hard can it be to do that Delta training? I think they're doing a great job on that.
Yeah, it's basically something to say that you've done this, you acknowledge that there is an existence of a change in the requirements and that you know what they are and that you have at least been briefed on it. Acknowledge this. Now, if you don't adhere to those or you go outside of those, you've probably signed a document and gotten a certificate saying that you would adhere to it. You definitely signed the COPC, which says that you would adhere to it. So it's just basically going to be on you. Joy, last night, there was a troubling trend, and I want to wrap up the rest of the show, and we want to dedicate a good portion of this show every month that we get to do together to kind of discussing the value of the training that has existed in the ecosystem right now. And there is no better way to segue into that conversation with us than to talk about some head-scratching things that I noticed in the Q&A last night during the town hall. I like to keep track of the town hall Q&A just to see that's what people are asking for. We've talked about this before. And on 19 different occasions last night during the town hall, in the Q&A on 19 different occasions, I saw a somewhat worded question that basically the best way to summarize them all in one loop is I am required to be CMMC level 1 self-assessor. Let's say I am required to be CMMC level 1. When I go to input my score, is it going to be okay that I've put a negative score for the other 83 requirements? Now it's 85. The other 85 requirements not satisfied for my CMMC level 1 implementation. Joy, as an instructor, I know it makes your skin crawl. So please, can you hop on the podium and just explain why that's terribly wrong, foundationally wrong?
There hasn't been great communication around this, has there? And hence all of this confusion. And we know hundreds of thousands of DIB contractors are going to be in that level 1 group and have been looking at EMAS and going, how am I going to do this and represent myself in that reflects well on me as a contractor? And, I've seen training at different industry conferences for the contractors on the SPRS system, where they've pointed out changes that are to come and new ways of navigating the system that is being matured to reflect CMMC levels. So at level 1 for FCI, there will be an option to select that is the only level that you're reporting into the SPRF or SPRS based on any given contract. And that will allow you to input a score that reflects just the level 1 controls. Right. So it will make sense. It's not going to be the kind of thing where they're going to have to do backwards math and put the burden on the contractor to prove why they have the negative score and all of that. It's going to be a lot more organized than what anyone has communicated. And that would be a great thing for the cyber A. Well, it's not the cyber AB, actually. It's the defense acquisition, right? Community.
Yeah, but I think if it was a part of the cyber or the CMMC program, if it's an element of it, that you're going to have to self-attest your level 1 score in the SPRS system or EMAS or whatever you have uploaded into. Yeah. I think that it would be adequate wherever the resource documentation is available for that documentation to be there. But essentially, the goal or the breakdown is that there's only 15 requirements. 17 total practices that are in NIST 800-171 are condensed into 15 requirements in CMMC level 1. 3 PE requirements are combined by semicolons. Whole episode about that 2 years ago on the podcast. Jacob found a revelation and we talked about it. But essentially, when you go to input your score, the score is going to be out of the total amount in the DoD assessment methodology, which is assigned to that particular control, right? So you would input in level 1 controls, right? In the SPRS system. So it would only be applicable to those. Those other 85 controls are not applicable to the scope of that score. You're not going to report. You're not going to get negative. It's going to be okay. Well, folks, due to some technical difficulties, we lost Joy for the remaining part of the show. And we had some information to cover with regards to the benefits of the CCP training and how you can kind of leverage it, especially when it comes to the managed service provider, external service provider construct found within the CMMC scheme of things. So look forward to Joy and I getting together and filming a smaller episode covering that information, because we feel it's vital to get out before the next AB Town Hall update. But until then, see you next week.